The world watched in horror as Russia launched another wave of missile attacks on Ukraine. These attacks, which occurred overnight, primarily targeted vital energy infrastructure. The consequences were immediate and devastating. Initial reports indicate that at least 10 Ukrainian civilians were injured, including a young child. This latest act of aggression is a stark reminder of the ongoing conflict that continues to plague the region. It underscores the human toll of this war, a toll borne by innocent civilians caught in the crossfire. The targeting of energy infrastructure, particularly as winter approaches, raises serious concerns about the well-being of the Ukrainian people. The international community swiftly condemned the attacks. World leaders expressed outrage and called for an immediate cessation of hostilities. The United Nations Security Council convened an emergency meeting to discuss the escalating situation. This latest development has further inflamed tensions between Russia and the West. In response to Russia's missile attacks, former U.S. President Donald Trump announced his consideration of imposing new sanctions on Russia. Speaking from his Mar-a-Lago residence, Trump condemned the attacks, describing Russia's actions as pounding Ukraine. He warned of large-scale banking sanctions, and tariffs if Russia continues its aggression. Trump's proposed sanctions could target a range of Russian economic sectors. He hinted at penalties on Russian goods and services. He also raised the possibility of secondary sanctions, which would target countries and businesses that continue to do business with Moscow. These measures, if implemented, would represent a significant escalation of economic pressure on Russia. However, Trump also emphasized the need for a peaceful resolution to the conflict. He urged both Russia and Ukraine to get to the table right now and engage in meaningful peace negotiations. Citing his past interactions with Russian President Vladimir Putin, Trump expressed his belief that Putin desires a negotiated settlement. Trump's dual approach of sanctions and a call for diplomacy reflects the complexities of the situation. It remains to be seen whether this approach will bear fruit. The international community is watching closely to see how Russia responds to these developments. The recent missile attacks and subsequent sanctions threats come at a delicate time for U.S.-Ukraine relations. The relationship has been strained by a series of disagreements and misunderstandings. A recent Oval Office meeting between Trump and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky ended without a resolution on a key mineral rights deal. Adding to the tension, the U.S. recently halted the sharing of weapons and intelligence with Ukraine. Trump has stated that he will not provide Ukraine with defensive weapons unless Zelensky demonstrates a willingness to negotiate with Russia. This stance has been met with criticism from some quarters, who argue that it weakens Ukraine's position in any future negotiations. Despite these challenges, Trump insists that he is committed to working towards a peaceful resolution of the conflict. He points to a recent letter from Zelensky, expressing readiness for peace talks as evidence of progress. However, the suspension of military aid and the lack of a concrete agreement on mineral rights raise questions about the depth of U.S. support for Ukraine. The path to peace in the region remains fraught with obstacles. Russia shows no signs of relenting in its military campaign. Ukraine, for its part, is determined to defend its sovereignty and territorial integrity. The international community is caught in the middle, seeking to balance support for Ukraine with efforts to prevent a wider conflict. A key development in the coming days will be the meeting between U.S. and Ukrainian officials in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. This meeting, scheduled for next week, will provide an opportunity for both sides to discuss the way forward. The U.S. delegation is expected to emphasize the need for negotiations and a peaceful settlement. It remains to be seen whether Ukraine will be willing to engage in talks while under attack. The success of any future negotiations will depend heavily on the willingness of both Russia and Ukraine to compromise. It will also require sustained pressure from the international community, including the threat of further sanctions. The stakes are high, not just for Ukraine, but for the entire region. The world is watching and hoping for a peaceful resolution to this long-running conflict.